All right, well, good afternoon. Welcome to the Rotary Room. For those of you who didn't know, this is actually officially the Rotary Room. We've never met in here before, so welcome. And welcome to those on Zoom as well. So I am Sarah, the current president of the Rotary Club of Chicago, and I am officially opening the 5,720th meeting of the Rotary Club of Chicago. And we do have a thought of the day. Jody is our thought of the day. So you can stand wherever you like, because we don't have a, well, actually come up here so the Zoom people can hear you. So I'll switch you places.
Trick or treat. This Thursday is Halloween, celebrated by children and adults. And as a teacher, I had to share 3 lessons about Halloween. The custom of going from door to door in costume can be traced back to the 16th century, when children and adults went in costume from door to door, and they would recite a verse or do a skit in exchange for a treat. If they didn't get a treat, there was a threat to the homeowners of some kind of trick. The custom of carving out pumpkins or jack-o'-lanterns came from Ireland and England and Scotland and was brought to North America by the immigrants and was celebrated. And I thought, who the heck was Jack? Our family carves pumpkins every year, and this came up in conversation. And of course, my 9-year-old grandson Googled it and came up with the answer. Jack was an Irishman who misbehaved and got into so much trouble that he was in league with the devil. And he could not get into heaven because he was so bad. So he teamed up with the devil, but stingy Jack made the mistake of trying to play a trick on the devil, and he lost. So the devil would not even take him into hell and condemned him to wander the earth forever with only a light in a carved out turnip to light his way. So our custom of making jack-o'-lanterns goes back to Stingy Jack. And the lesson of that is, don't try to trick the devil. The last lesson I'm going to share with you is on your table, you have the iconic Halloween candy, and that is candy corn. Candy corn was invented in the 1880s and was originally, because of our gregarian society, called chicken feed. Now that wasn't very popular, and the name evolved into candy corn. Although it has 3 different colors, all 3 colors are the same flavor. Mallow with some vanilla, and then the corn kernels are actually covered with an edible wax. So when you pick up to eat the candy corn, you're getting a little bit of wax. The last thing I learned about Halloween is that it has become so popular with adults that among the party rankings for adults in the United States is number 1, New Year's party, number 2, Super Bowl party, and number 3, Halloween parties. So I hope this Thursday that you have more treats than tricks in your life. Happy Halloween.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for that. So moving forward, we have our fun fact for this week. Shelby Edwards, she's one of the trustees on the foundation board. Shelby Edwards is a classically trained violinist of 10 years. She has recently resumed training. So let's see what we remember from last week. Show up member, it's first hand that I see. This member is a collector of fine spirits and likes to attend mixology classes. Oh no. Who got it first? Was it Alita? Okay, Alita. Yes, it is, and he is here today. Yes. Can you step up here? I'm trapped by the cords. Add into your collection. What is that? 4? Number 4. Very good. Yes, so make sure if you have not filled in that little blurb for the fun fact that I do get that. Looking at you, Mark. We already discussed this before the meeting. Okay, next Tuesday is our evening fellowship meeting. So this is at Avley. We talked about this last week. This will be our new location for the first Tuesday of the month. So moving forward, we'll be meeting at Avley. It's Avley on the Park. It's in the Lakeshore East neighborhood, just east of like the Blue Cross Blue Shield building, the Aon Center. It's in that area, just north of Maggie Daley Park. So that's, if you can kind of picture where that is, you've got the Millennium Park, and then Maggie Daley Park is on the east side of Columbus. And this location is just north of that. There's discounted parking in the attached garage. I've been told, I believe the parking is $4. Is that right? $4, which is a big bargain in the city of Chicago. And so make sure you do register. It's next Tuesday and it's $40. So our meetings moving forward now are $40 for members and visitors. So please make sure that you register for next Tuesday. We don't have a speaker. We're hoping maybe the chef will come out and say a few words to us, perhaps, but it will be mostly a fellowship meeting with us. We are restarting the dictionary project, so grab a partner. You'll go out to a school, visit the 3rd grade classrooms, and deliver a little presentation about the dictionary. It's more than just a dictionary, although having a dictionary is pretty cool anyway. But there's like what I would say, an encyclopedia in the back. It has presidents and capitals and things like that. So you'll contact Wes here in the back. If you are interested in that, you will email him or talk to him today. The Community Service Committee is partnering with Exodus World Services to solicit items for a refugee welcome pack. We are collecting items through December to give to Exodus World Service for disbursement. So our job is just to collect the items. And this time I have shown you this slide. I've been talking about this for a few weeks, that it looks like a wedding registry. When you see the email from the office on Tuesdays, or you see it in the gyrator and there's a link, this is where the link takes you. So what you'll do is you'll look at the different items and you'll put your name. So, well, it's kind of cut off because of the Zoom thing, but it says, like on the top left, it's say kitchen item, and then the next column over is Rotarian in charge. So you would put your name next to the item that you're interested in, that you're going to purchase. And Lisa Russ is the one who's coordinating the collection. So look through this, put your name next to things, and we'll be basically furnishing a home in part of a refugee. If you are interested in being a mentor, this is one of our CPS grants from the last go around. Poe Classical First Lego League is you can be an assistant coach or a mentor to children interested in STEM. They've already started, but of course you are still welcome to volunteer. The final competition will be in December, and you've got Patricia's email address there if you'd like to take a picture. This information is also in the gyrator and in today's email. PCs for People, we are co-sponsoring an electronics drive. I see that fist pump, Andrew. So all donated items will be refurbished and provided to low-income individuals and families. So if you've got computers, printers, random cords, perhaps, monitors, anything that's sort of in your way that you're not using anymore, this is an excellent thing to do. So this is on November 19th, and you've got the address there where you can bring your stuff. What day of the week is November 19th? Does anybody, is it a Thursday? It's a Tuesday. Ah, so perhaps after a Tuesday Rotary meeting, go home and get your stuff and then go here and drop it off and it goes to a good cause. Yes. Okay, so Alita just said that if people who come to the meeting on the 19th but aren't able to do the drop off, you can bring it to the meeting and Alita will get the electronics there. So thank you for that. We are doing a Thanksgiving Day volunteer project. So we've got the days and the times here. This is at the Lawson House at 30 West Chicago Avenue. And if you aren't able to volunteer on Thanksgiving Day proper, then the days leading up to that, you can help Alita with meal prep, and you've got the address there as well. So again, this information is in the email that went out today. You can take a picture now, or you can talk to Alita at a later time. Our community service college scholarship is up and running. So if you know individuals attending college in the city proper, in the city of Chicago, it could be 2-year or 4-year institution. This person needs to have high levels of community service. They will apply through our portal. So that information has gone out. The applications are due on December 31st. If you know of somebody and you'd like to get them the information, just talk to me, email me. And then February 23rd, you all have a date with me. It is a Sunday from 1 to 4 is our annual birthday party fundraiser. So this is from 1 to 4 at Chicago Theater Works on Belmont. The projects of the International Service Committee will be spotlighted. And that brings me to our speaker for today. Richard Kyte is the Endowed Professor of Ethics at, is it Viterbo University, and Director of the D.B. Reinhardt Institute for Ethics and Leadership. He is a longtime member of the Rotary Club of La Crosse, is the author of several books, co-hosts a podcast titled The Ethical Life, and writes a bi-weekly column that appears in 75 newspapers across the country. His latest book, Finding Your Third Place, Building Happier Communities and Making Great Friends Along the Way, is available from Fulcrum Publishing. So we're going to keep our questions for the end. I just need to get his presentation loaded here, and then I'll share again, and I'll bring you up. Okay, we are ready for you. Thank you for being here. We'll switch to the corner.
Well, thank you all very much. It's really a delight to be here. I'm on a kind of a book tour. I've been speaking to a lot of bookstores, libraries, coffee shops, and Rotary clubs about this book that came out in June, Finding Your Third Place. And what I want to talk about here is kind of the central argument of this book. What the book is mostly stories that try to help us understand why third places are really kind of central to the health of our society, and connect it with organizations like Rotary. Because one of the things we're finding is that there's all these options for better social engagement in our world that aren't being taken advantage of, and we need a better language to talk about this. And so that's my primary aim. And what is a third place? Well, it's a term that comes from Ray Oldenburg, who was a sociologist who taught in Florida, who wrote a book in 1989 called The Great Good Place. And in that, he said that our first place is home, second place is work, third place is where we go to socialize. It's a place where we both form and maintain our friendships. And it's great for expanding our range of acquaintances. It's also very good for deepening our friendships because it gives us places to go. But we've seen third places disappearing from our communities. We have fewer social gathering places, and people are taking advantage of the social gathering places less. And of course, we know that we need these actual physical places for service organizations like Rotary, Kiwanis Lions, all the service clubs. But we also need people to make a deliberate intention of going to them. And so that's what I want to talk to you about. And I want to begin with this question because this is kind of the central question I want to set up. Are lives today better or worse than they were 60 years ago? And what we find is when we ask this question worldwide, just about everybody says lives are worse today than they were in the past. And yet, if we look at the objective data, it's just not the case. In just about every measurable respect, our lives are better, and not just a little bit better, they are much better. So if we look at where we were 60 years ago with regard to poverty, for example, what we find is that, say, in 1960, we had around 60% of the world lived in extreme poverty, and today that number is around 8%. This is a remarkable achievement in a very short period of time. Thank you. Things like child mortality is greatly reduced. For most of the world's history, 40% of children died before the age of 5, and that was the way it was for centuries until the Industrial Revolution, and we start seeing improvements, and especially over the last 100 years. And the result of that is really greatly improved life expectancy, especially over the last 100 years. And why do we have greater life expectancy? It's partly due to advances in healthcare, but it's more due to things like the immunization. So if you think of what happens with the development of the polio vaccine, it's the development of it which requires people that are trained to do research. They're trained in the scientific method, but then it's also the implementation, which takes the coordination of institutions. And so when we combine capitalism, democracy, and technology, what you get is all kinds of innovation, focus on how do we improve lives, the capital to implement that on a wide scale, and then democracies allow us to collaborate in ways that expand that implementation. And so we find that the only places where we're struggling to eradicate polio now are places where we have a breakdown of civil society and we can't get the collaboration. It's not a lack of resources. And yet here's the share of the population that says the world is getting better, and it's only China that even comes close to 50%. What we find is that in all the most developed nations, people are the most pessimistic about the state of the world. And this is a really paradox. Why are the places where the living conditions are the best, do people think that the world is the worst? Do you have a thought? We're spoiled. Well, I mean, that might be part of the answer. I've got another answer for you, and so I'm trying to set us up here. Well, one of the things we know that people are feeling worse. So it's not just that people have evidence that things actually are getting worse. People are feeling worse about their lives, and the way that we measure this is things like anxiety, stress, and depression. And like anxiety, for example, we've only been measuring this systematically since about 1990. And there's all kinds of things that we've started to measure just in the last 30 years or so because we're noticing the effect they have on our society. But we don't bring the same kind of resources to those as we bring to everything else. Like we'll bring resources, something like lead poisoning, on like eradicating, like banning lead from paint and replacing lead pipes. We don't know what to do with something like anxiety, stress, and depression. So what about the conditions that make us feel worse? This, I want to just show you why this turns out to be a pretty significant problem. And this is one of the most fascinating and also troubling studies that I've seen in the last couple of years. This is looking at historical language records. What we find is that cognitive distortions, like words and phrases that are indicative of cognitive distortions, have been on the rise since about 2000. And the last time this happened was in Germany right after World War II. And what cognitive distortions are, they're patterns of irrational thought that are symptomatic of people who are undergoing depression. And so what the research in this study say is that is it possible that the world is undergoing a collective depression at the time? That we're all engaged in increasingly irrational patterns of thinking. And so we have all kinds of evidence that we are feeling worse about our lives. You know, the evidence about the loneliness epidemic, more social fragmentation, stress, anxiety, depression. Those are the big three. And the question is why? Why, if things are actually getting better, we're healthier, we're wealthier, we're better educated, we have more freedoms. Why are we feeling worse? And the short answer is technology. And I want to tell a little bit of a story about this. And this is the best, like, simple way I've seen of kind of showing this graphically. What we have is the increasing development of technology, both in the pace with which technology develops and the power of the technology to change our lives and to change it significantly right away. And so if you look at these kind of early technologies like the printing press and the telegraph, the steam engine, these were really powerful. I mean, we can't argue that the written word, the printed word has not changed our lives profoundly, but it took centuries for it to have a really significant impact. It wasn't as if the printing press was developed and within the next couple of years, civilizations were changing. And yet, if we think about something like AI, when OpenAI released ChatGPT-3 a couple of years ago, within a few weeks, I was having students write papers using ChatGPT-3. I mean, like, this is a profound change that happens almost immediately, and this is the way new technologies work. And this has happened like with social media, with smartphones, is they get introduced and in a very short time, they're radically changing the ways in which we interact with one another. And our brains do not adjust to this at the same kind of speed. We are operating with the same brains as our ancestors who lived here a couple thousand years ago. That is, the things that we tend to be, that give us pleasure, the things that make us frightened or concerned, are pretty much the same sorts of things. And that is why, for example, like if we were to have a snake crawl into the room, there would be several of you who might shout or jump up on a chair, right? Even though, how many of you know somebody who's actually been killed by a snake? Like, okay, we have one. That's a lot more than normal, like in a room, but it's possible. But I'll tell you what, we have our environment filled with things that actually are very dangerous for us, that we aren't innately afraid of. Because the world we live in is so manipulated that we have to constantly be intentionally adjusting how we live in order to not be concerned about the things that we shouldn't really be afraid of, and to be legitimately concerned about the things that we should be. And so this requires an immense lot of psychological effort to adjust. At the same time, we have a world in which technology is being purposefully developed to take advantage of the way in which our brains work, to make us make more use of the technology that's developed. And a key one here is the way in which digital devices and the software that is used on them is designed to be addictive. And so we have neuroscientists that are employed, for example, to figure out how do we make these short videos more addictive so people keep coming back and back and back to them by like giving the users like little jolts of dopamine and And this is a brain hack because why do we have brains that produce dopamine and gives us little bits of pleasures in response to somebody saying they like us or they like something about us? That is an evolutionary adaptation that really benefits collaboration. And so like people want to be liked, they want to be appreciated, and that makes us work together very well. But what happens when you get a device that gives you those same boosts of dopamine when you're being not social at all, when you're not interacting with anybody at all? Well, it's a brain hack that takes advantage of an evolutionary adaptation that is not good for society. And this is why when we look at what's going on right now, and we look at things like anxiety, depression, isolation, why are people feeling worse about our lives? It's not actually everybody in society, it's mostly the younger generations. Why does it affect the most developed nations in the world the most radically? It's because those are the nations which are the earliest and the heaviest adopters of newer technologies. And so this is research that comes from Jonathan Kyte, who came out with a book just recently called The Anxious Generation. If you aren't familiar with it, I would really suggest you take a look at it. Because what we see is that it's in 2012 that we notice a real radical shift in the mental well-being of young people. And even though older generations use smartphones and they use social media, it hasn't had the same effect on them because they use it in very different ways. When we look at studies of social media, in particular, older generations tend to use the older forms of social media like Facebook, not to replace social interaction, but to complement it and enhance it. So people that have already acquired really robust social networks in their lives, like people like you who join an organization and come to meetings and so forth, you might use Facebook to find out where people are going when they're meeting, find out what kind of events are going on. And that kind of use really boosts your ability to engage in social interaction. But people are using something like TikTok and using it for many hours in a day. They're using it instead of interacting with other people. And that's where it has a negative effect. Yeah.
How recent is that data? In my experience, something I say frequently,
Yeah.
Facebook has broken our parents' brains, sincerely. Like, it is something to where I have a lot of friends and family members who, all day long, 24 hours a day, they're pretty much on Facebook.
Yeah.
I don't think that was the case 5 years ago.
No.
But
No.
now I think that's very different in how that's switched in terms of those things. And I'm curious too with the data because I look at this chart and I see, especially in developed countries, you know, the standard of living. And
Yep.
when you look at the transfer of wealth in terms of, especially for younger people, and how that's changed over the last 20 years or so. Whereas in the developing world, standards have gotten significantly better. Like, would that potentially explain that? I'm just curious where like the data is and like how recent it's still.
So two things that explain why would a country like China, so many more people say the world is getting better? Well, it's because so many people have seen improvements in the living conditions in their own lifetimes. That's absolutely it. But the other thing that happens is like communities in which social networks are largely intact, people tend to have much more positive attitudes about how the world is, even if their lives have not gotten materially much better. So a lot of it has to do with how comfortable they feel in belonging to a social network. And I'll give you a few more slides and I'll let you look on this. And I'm kind of leery with things that look too much at what happened in 2020, 2021, because that was an outlier. I want to look at what are the trends before that. And then we're just starting to collect really good data of what's happened since to see if that's an ongoing.
Just in my experience, I mean, it is very different this point in time than it was 5 years ago with older generations. And I have a hard case just with my own experience, just firsthand of seeing like that not having similar effects. So.
Okay. So I'm going to rush through a whole bunch of things, then we'll come to some questions. Okay. So here's like some more recent data on depressive episodes. Here we see the rise of anxiety and depression. What we find is that it's highly correlated, mental health and and limited hours on digital devices. So average screen time right now for 18 to 14 years old is about 9 hours a day. Some of that is spent in school on screens, but there's also a lot of time outside of school. But those who are spending less than 2 hours a day tend to have very few negative effects. What's happening is what sociologists call an opportunity cost, whereas the more time one spends on digital devices, the more time on that, the less time they spend with friends. And that seems to be the key thing. And we find this in countries all over. So here's a study from the UK on what's been the change since the 1970s in how children spend their time. And we find a lot more screen-based activities and more participation in organized sports, but less amount of time socializing and in unstructured activities. So the question is what we can do about it. And that's what I try to focus on, because I think we can say, well, let's ban phones, and I think schools should. I don't think there's really any argument for the positive effects of phones in schools. And so I just say, like, start there, but that's not the full answer. I think we need to intentionally make social gathering a purposeful part of our lives. And I think, and we have to say that this is one of the real benefits of organizations like Rotary, is that we make social gatherings central. This is what I want to show is we have this data is what's going on recently, like with social media and cell phones. But I think the story is really technology in general, because when we look at word usage through the last 200 years, we find that in 1800 the word self was used only about a third as much as the word friend. Find like in the red there is the use of the word friend, and then by 2000, the word self is used 3 times as much as the word friend. And so when do they cross? They cross around 1910. And there was a real significant turning point at that point in our society where we have all these young people at the turn of the 20th century, beginning of the 20th century, coming into cities from rural areas where they have really strong social networks. And this technology, the automobile and the train and growing industry in cities brought all these young professionals into cities where they didn't have friends. And so somebody like Paul Harris comes here and looks around and says, like, well, I want to meet with friends. How do we do it? And so he creates a new organization for that purpose. In a very few years, not only does that spread, but Rotary Lions in Kiwanis start right around the same time, also in the upper Midwest, for the very same reason. It's young people looking for friendship. And what they do is they decide to do something constructively about it. So they create these groups. And the other thing that's interesting, somebody like Paul Harris, is that he had studied under James McCosh at Princeton University, who was one of the common sense theorists, who was in the school with Adam Smith, who placed a great deal of emphasis on sympathy or fellow feeling as the root of society. That is, any kind of moral society has to be based on sympathy, which comes out of our friendships. And so that's why you find Paul Harris in his early writings and speeches always talking about fellowship and friendship as the keys of Rotary, because that is what generates sympathy. That, by the way he used sympathy is how we use the word empathy now. It's the ability to know what another person is going through. And there's no substitute for it. We need friendship in order to develop the skill of empathy. And so that's why I suggest let's use the idea of a third place, these places where we gather as kind of friendship gardens, these places where we nurture fellowship and develop the skills of empathy. So it's especially important for our young people, because I think they're undergoing a crisis right now, but it's also important for all of us. And what I'd like to do is like both praise you as Rotarians for kind of understanding that and keeping fellowship at the heart of Rotary, but also like learning how to use that and how we talk about the importance of Rotary in a world today. It has the same importance that it always did. Our brains are still the same. We're still social animals who need social connection in order to feel whole. I'll give you two last statistics and then I'll stop for questions. Joining one club reduces your chance of dying in the next year by 50%. Those who have robust social networks have a 30 to 50% lower rate of dementia worldwide. It has incredible beneficial effects on us. So we know what to do. We just have to be more focused on doing it. Thank you very much. Yes.
I have a question. What do you think, what is the role of progression?
What is the role of misinformation in the progression of depression? I think misinformation is largely a symptom and an effect of social fragmentation. What we know is that communities that are higher in social capital, because they have neighbors who know one another better, they have much more social interaction, and people are engaged, they have much lower rates of polarization. And when you have low rates of polarization, you don't have misinformation because people are actually talking to one another. When you have a lot of polarization that comes out of this fragmentation, that's where misinformation gets its foothold, because you have people talking in silos. And so this is, we know this right now, like the majority of people that we poll in the United States, and you ask Republicans what's their opinion of Democrats, and Democrats what their opinion of Republicans, it's completely removed from reality because they're just talking within their silos. And this is what happens during social fragmentation. Yeah.
So I'm completely in line with you about how the younger generation, Gen Z, and all this stuff, their interpersonal skills have been diminished over time.
Yeah.
But in terms of say like anxiety and depression with like say like Gen X's, Boomers, and beyond though, how many of them have actually been open to talking about their been more open about their mental health issues, their anxiety, their depression? I think just because Gen Zers, I think just because it's become more, it's just become more normal for them to open up about their mental health issues. While in contrast, I think the older folks, there's still that stigma to reveal about that. Has there been data?
Yeah. So what we find, yeah, you're absolutely right. Younger people are much more willing to self-diagnose or self-report that they're undergoing depression or anxiety. They're much more willing to talk about mental health than older generations. If we were only relying on surveys, we would think, oh, okay, we've just got a generation that talks about this a lot more, but the conditions are the same. But what we find out is both like suicides and suicide attempts are really up for those generations, beginning around the same time, 2012. And we also find like clinical diagnoses are really up for that generation. And so we know that if it just surveys, it looks like it's even a worse problem for those generations. But then if you kind of discount what's the reporting effect, we still have a market increase.
Yeah, but I think we've seen why are people talking about mental health seems to be an issue these past 10 years. It's always been an issue, but it's never been really brought up.
Yeah. It's always been an issue, but it's a bigger issue today. That's what I would say. Yeah. Yes.
This has been phenomenal, Sarah. We know I've talked about Thursday. Thank you for sharing. One question I have for us is Rotary. It's challenging to recruit new members.
Yep.
Have you seen? I love that. I'm going to steal the 50% of people like increase.
Yeah.
I'm absolutely steal that for membership pitches, but have there other strategies in ways that you've seen membership organizations in third space more effectively grow and establish themselves? It's an uphill climb a lot of times now to try and get people to.
Yeah. So I've been fortunate to travel around and speak to a lot of different clubs. I'm finding that like one of the things that seems to really work well is issue-oriented clubs. And I was just speaking to the founder of the sex trafficking club in Seattle, like their focus on stopping. What's that? No, I think he's involved with it, but yeah. But Virginia is the name of the person who started the club. Yeah, but she's like that has been very successful. If you get something that's a pressing issue in your community, and you focus on that, it'll bring people in, experimenting with like different forms of meeting and different times. But you really have to, there's a different answer for each community. That's a basic, and you have to be open to exploring what that is.
One more question?
Yeah, Robert.
It's interesting as you're talking with the kids in school. I'm finding that more and more schools are now beginning to ban phones from the classroom, which I think is good. And I guess the question becomes, how do you get back to that social interaction? Because obviously this device was created and pushed forward to us by an introvert.
Yeah.
And, you know, how do we get back to those extrovert activities?
So you have to not only ban the phones, but, okay, yeah. So banning the phones in schools, a lot of schools are trying this. But how do we get back to activities? I think, like, if you're a school that wants to do this, you have to first of all ban the phones so that you have kids talking to one another instead of looking at their phones, like in between classes, especially and during lunch breaks and things. But then you have to really focus on how do we develop belonging, and it has to be something that you do all the way through the school system. And I've been working with some schools to do that. How do we create a culture of belonging, and so that you have all the teachers looking at this, and then what they're doing is they're talking to their students and they're encouraging them. They're encouraging the formation of new clubs, and they're talking to their students about this. They're telling them why this is really important for their mental health and for their physical health. So you can't just take something away. You've got to put something meaningful in its place. And I think that the key to that is belonging. So it's a great question. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you to our speakers. So I have a gift for you, so don't go very far. So our speaker gifts this year are reusable tote bags with our Rotary Club logo on it. So this is for you to parade around Wisconsin.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for being here. It really was an excellent talk. To Andrew's point, you know, one of the questions you might ask yourself is Rotary my third place, right? So for me, I've mentioned this before, how much I enjoy our meetings, our time together. And it's just really serendipitous that next week we have a fellowship meeting. So that seems like a good chance to practice our fellowship and being off the phone. So to that point, I found, because I ban phones in my classroom. They're not, I don't even want to see it. It's in my syllabus. If it comes out, it goes away. And I found that when the students put the phone away, somebody will speak up. Somebody will talk to somebody else. And then that starts the ball rolling. So the more extroverted person in the class will tend to fix the problem of silence, because people don't like silence. Right? Because then people want to fill it. So yeah, no phones in my class. Okay, so we'll move forward here. We don't have any visiting Rotarians in the room today. Well, our speaker is a visiting Rotarian. So let's move forward with a few another fellowship announcement. So this should be next Monday, because it's the first Monday of the month. This is the Rotary Means Business Fellowship at Cafe Chow on Madison from 6 to 8. I think the registration or doors open or something at 5:30. This is a business networking event. You don't have to register ahead of time. You just show up and talk to other people about your business, I suppose. So this message is from Nancy. So Nancy and Andrew are our membership co-chairs, membership committee, and they are looking for people to join their committee. And their next meeting is on Wednesday, November 6th at 5 p.m. via Zoom. And the whole goal is to generate committee members, to review the many roles that need to be filled, to brainstorm ideas and process, and then also to establish a regular meeting day and time. So if you are interested in joining the membership committee, this is a really important committee, as they all are. You can email Nancy. She's actually up here. She can wave. You're actually on our screen right now, Nancy. Yep. Nancy is our president-elect also. Okay. So I mentioned this at the beginning. I'm mentioning it again. So next Tuesday, 5:30, Avley on the Park. This is the address, 180 Northfield Boulevard. Again, that to me means absolutely nothing. It's north of Maggie Daly Park, east of Blue Cross Blue Shield building. You can park in the garage near Mariano's. Make sure you get your parking ticket validated for the discounted rate. And as a reminder, our meetings are now $40. On November 12th, we'll be having the speaker from Little Brothers Friends of the Elderly. This is the group that we wrote Thanksgiving Day cards for. And we managed, well, Lisa and I had to take some homework home, but we managed to get all 130 cards filled out. And so I will present those cards to him when he comes to speak to us at this meeting. Every Friday is the Rotary Roundtable. This is a networking and fellowship opportunity on the Union League Club 4th floor. You don't register for that. If you are available, you just go and you hang out. Speaking of hanging out, if you are interested in visiting Calgary, I encourage you at least once in your Rotary life to go to an international convention. And so next year in 2025, it is in Calgary. So if you're interested in attending that, do make sure that you are keeping up with the due dates for cost, because they do go up. So I thought about writing a poem to do something different than just stand up here and ask you for money to donate to our foundation. So like a roses are red, violets are blue kind of poem. But my PhD is not in English or poetry. So I'm just gonna stand up here and ask you for money again. So please, if you like the projects that we do, which I'm sure that you do, they can't happen without donations. So please make sure that the office knows how you wish to donate. We're going to be really starting to push this because our annual campaign will be kicking off very soon. So it'll be more than just me standing up here asking you for money. Okay, so with that, your main homework is to register for next Tuesday's meeting. So if you haven't done that yet, which I know you haven't because I went in and registered before this meeting and me and Gunnar were the only two. So he and I don't need a date night on a Tuesday. We need more people to come join us at Avley. So with that, Alita, do you have an announcement? Perhaps you, maybe, yeah, because it, yeah.
So I have my nominating committee all set as of 12:15 today. So we are opening nominations to the board for our president designee. So that will be for the 2027-2028 year. Yeah. And then we have an opening on the foundation board. So if you all have anyone that you would like to nominate, if you'd like to self-nominate yourself, please reach out to me and we will have interviews soon. Thank you.
Nancy, you look different than you did just a few minutes ago. Nice hat. Cute. Okay, so
Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween to you as well. Okay, so with that, our four-way test is here. So let us rise and we will close the meeting with our Rotary four-way test of the things we think, say, or do. Number one, is it the truth? Number two, is it fair to all concerned? Number three, will it build goodwill and better friendships? Number four, will it be beneficial to all concerned? And then number five, will it be fun? With that, I officially bring our meeting to a close. Thank you to our speaker. Follow us on social media, but not too much, right? Because we need face-to-face, not too much on social media. So with that, I bring this meeting to a close. Thank you.
Yeah, easy to plug in.